Hello and welcome to me reading a really wacky creepypasta with lots of feedback because I have OTT on. Okay. I'm getting drunk and reading a creepypasta. Two creepypastas, actually. I believe that the second one is a sequel to the first one. I don't know. I can't find info on who wrote either of them. Um, the first one says it's written by the Devil God, but that's only on someone else's reading of this. It isn't on the actual thing. So I don't know. Yeah. So I'm gonna assume they were both written by the same person because the second one is very clearly a sequel to the first one, despite the fact that I can't find anything that actually connects them except for the fact that the titles and the stories are very clearly like sequels. But for all I know, the second one could be a fan fiction of the first one. I don't know. This creepypasta is wild. I'm just gonna say that now. It is extremely violent. Um, like ridiculously violent and graphic. So if you're not into if you've never been able to get through a Saw movie, I don't recommend listening to this. So listener discretion is advised. Anyway, so let's get started with the first one. This is Mario 64 Damned. And we're taking a shot. It's not actually a shot, but still really tastes not very good. Okay, here we go. I could never in my wildest nightmares have ever imagined the horrors that could plague even the most simple of life's enjoyments. The darkness that could invade any world, whether it be real or fictional. It all started the day me and my girlfriend were talking about video games we used to play growing up, and games that we used to enjoy. Over the years of my childhood, I have collected several games pertaining to several different consoles, and we both found the topic of the Nintendo 64 to be the most fun. So that day, we decided to pick up one from my uncle's video game store and perhaps even pick up one of the greatest Nintendo 64 titles, Super Mario 64. Now, when we got there, it took some time and a lot of browsing, but we were able to find the game after about an hour or so in several bins he had placed throughout the store. That's right, Mario 64, the game that most places have under like a glass counter or in a cabinet because it's, the thing most people are going to buy. But they had to look for hours instead of just asking him, like, yo, uncle, where's the fucking Mario 64? But no, but whatever. um, the only copy he had, it appeared. Oh, the only copy he had, it appeared. I can't read. As well as that, we had found an N64. The burp wasn't part of that, by the way. Neither was that, or that, or that, or that. The very last one that he had in stock, ironically. The best part about it was, he gave it to us for free. He told me that it had been bought and returned nearly 15 times since it came into his possession, and now he was just looking to get rid of it. That's why he had it in bins that you couldn't find it in. He also told me that ironically, again ironically, the game was always returned with it as well. The N64 or the game? Oh, the N64, okay. The game was always... So everyone just goes and buys the N64 and Mario 64 and always brings it back, and he hasn't just tried to put it on eBay or something, despite the fact that 15 times people have brought it, both of them back? Seems like just going on eBay or something would be the best way, or just throwing it out if you don't want it, but whatever. He had heard that something was wrong with one or the other, and that some people even went as far as to tell him that they were evil, made in hell, things like that. Seeing as how he only heard the story from 3 out of 15 customers, I brushed it off as just some hysterical people told some blah, Seeing as how he only heard the story from 3 out of 15 customers, I brushed it off as just some hysterical story told by people who decided they simply didn't want to keep the system, an excuse if you will, and gave him $20 for Super Mario 64. Cheap jerk gave me the N64 for free though. I don't. So he gave you the N64 for free, and that makes him cheap because you got Mario 64 for $20. You know how expensive Mario 64 usually is? Most places, like even just the cart, is like 50 to 70 bucks at most places I've been. But okay, yeah, cheap jerk, bro. We went back home after being gone for about an hour and a half looking for. I mean, we went in looking for specifically just a console and game, and instead of just asking our uncle who works there if he had them, and apparently he knew he did have them because he had been returned it 15 times. We're not even to like the creepy part, and I already fucking hate this story. When I got home, I laid the system by my living room TV and started to rummage through old boxes where I kept all sorts of old games, ranging from classic Atari games to the ever-popular Dreamcast. The Dreamcast wasn't that popular, that's why it failed. That's why Sega went into only making software, but you know, it's whatever. It was actually sort of strange because in these boxes I found that I owned every major console except for an N64. Yeah, because everybody has a fucking Atari Jaguar sitting around, but nobody has an N64. Yeah, okay. I'm halfway done with the first pint already. That's right, I said first. Well, until now, anyways. I pulled out my box with all the N64 games in it because I had all the N64 games, but no N64, but I had an Atari. I found games like, quote, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, unquote, as well as its sequel, quote, Majora's Mask, unquote, and 2 Castlevania titles for the system itself, Castlevania 64 Legacy of Darkness. Those two were in parentheses instead of in quotes. And even though he listed the sequel to Ocarina of Time as just Majora's Mask, this one... Okay, never mind, that works. Then it was time to hook it up. I'm pretty sure, actually, I think that in the second story it mentions Castlevania as well, so I find it interesting that he's, pretty much given away part of the story that, yes, this is going to have Castlevania, Zelda, and Mario in it, but, I think, I don't know, I could be wrong. I'm reading this all on a whim. I'm pretty sure that this is something I read like forever ago, like years and years and years ago, I think, and I'm just kind of going off of that and reading it here. After everything was set up, my girlfriend decided that she wanted to put in Super Mario 64 first, and after some effort, the game was ready to go. Effort? It's raining outside for real. Effort? Okay, hold the phone, bro. Effort? What effort? What effort did you go through to load up Mario 64? You literally plug in an AV cable and a power cord, and then you push the button forward, the little on-off switch with the game in it. That's it? That's effort? Are you kidding me? You don't even have to, like, set the system up like you have to set up, like, an Xbox or a PS4. It's-a me, Mario, it called out in its upbeat pitch. My girlfriend decided to mess with Mario's face a bit before finally pressing start on her purple controller, and the screen transitioned to the file select screen. There were files already on the game. In fact, all 4 slots were filled, each having just started the game because there were no stars on any file, so we started deleting them. After we deleted one, however, the game froze. And there was a deafening screech coming from our TV speakers, and it sounded almost as if someone was screaming from the game itself. So does that mean like on the game or like from the cartridge itself, I wonder? My girlfriend turned off the system after about 5 seconds. After a moment or so, she flipped it back on and we went back to the file select screen. Strangely enough, the file that we had deleted on file 1 was back, and this time it had 66 stars, even though previously it had none. You can't beat the game with 66 stars without, like, cheating, by the way, so... And once more she deleted it, and again it made a loud screeching sound. This time I would swear to God that it was louder than before. To the point where we both fell back while covering our ears, and as I was closer to the plug than the system itself, I jerked it out of the wall. This time, before we bothered trying, I took the game out of the system and took it to the kitchen. It turned out that it was really dusty, which explained, at least to me, why the game was reacting the way it was, although it was still weird, because everyone knows when your game is dusty, it writes code in that signals flags that tell you how many stars you have in the game's settings. I don't know why I'm reading like that. I'm holding the mic with my hand. I'm going to set it down and hope that it's not super feedbacky. So you just now noticed that the game, was dusty, despite the fact that you went through all that nonsense to, get it, in the first place. And you apparently had a whole ass conversation with your uncle. Can't even sigh with this gate on. Taking another drink. I was 3 drinks. Although it was still weird. After cleaning it with a Q-tip, I love that he specifies that he cleaned it with a Q-tip, because that's, I think, how you're really supposed to clean it. I took it back to the living room. I handed it to her. She plugged the console back into the wall, and we were ready to go. By now, it was getting dark out. There was no light in the room, and we couldn't plug in our lamp because the TV and TV took up the outlet. So we were forced to play in the dark. There's no light in the room, no ceiling light in the room. For me, something didn't feel right because for some reason I was filled with a sense of nervousness that I could not quite explain. I shook it off and turned on the system. Okay. I'm just making sure that he didn't say that his girlfriend turned it back on already. I was ready to make fun of that, but no, she just plugged it back in. When we were back to the file select screen, each file that was there previously was gone, oddly enough, which to me confirmed my suspicion that it was just a dirty game messing up. That's not, I don't think I've ever heard of a dirty game creating files and giving them arbitrary star counts, but so we started a new game on file 1, and the screen lagged like it was a CD or something. But after about a minute, started up normally. We got the opening scene with Peach inviting Mario to the castle, and the camera, as usual, followed up the pathway to the giant green pipe which Mario leaped out of. She was in control of the game and took Mario directly to the castle. When she opened the door to the castle, there was a prolonged pause, which made me nervous. Once again, the loud screeching that ruined our game previously shot through our ears, and it felt like glass was jabbed into my eardrums. We were both overwhelmed because of the terrible screaming, and I couldn't even think to reach for the system to the plug. Reach the system to the plug. I couldn't even think to reach the system to the plug. After about 30 seconds, it stopped, and we looked up to the TV. Mario had somehow found his way to Big Boo's haunt, as the mansion that had never appeared this creepy when I used to play it loomed over Mario's head ominously. "What the hell?" I said as I regained myself. My girlfriend was still getting herself together, and it took her a minute to process what was going on. I took the controller now and took a good look at the mansion itself. It was nothing like what it was supposed to be. It had castle-like features, actually, and was covered totally in blood and rust. The sky had black and red colors about it, complemented by the black clouds that seemed to pass by in an instant. I noticed that a new tower was now coming out of the mansion, and upon getting a good look at it, I noticed several figures hanging from it. The whole screen faded to white, like it does in the entrance room when you look up at the skylight and go to the world that you obtain the wing cap in. When Mario reappeared, he had somehow made it on top of the tower, on a platform that went all the way around. The sky had a gloomy look, as if each cloud passed over the tower. As each cloud passed over the tower, as dark as the night sky, and lightning began to rule the sky and illuminate the clouds in its thunderous wake. That was a really, beautiful sentence, actually. Very descriptive. I tried for the first time to move Mario forward, but a bolt of lightning stopped any movement that I was willing to make at the moment. I dropped the controller. My heart began to race. I didn't know what to expect, and I could see by the look in my girlfriend's eyes that a strong sense of paranoia had overcome her. Because I constantly noticed her looking back behind us in the shadows that covered the room. With hesitation, I took the controller in hand and moved Mario forward about a foot or so before something fell from the top of the screen and the camera zoomed in on it. It was depiction of Mario with a noose around his neck. We both yelled out, and I dropped the controller to the floor. I moved back as quickly as possible. Mario's clothes were ripped all over, exposing several parts of his body. Underneath the clothes, we could make out stab wounds from either a knife or a dagger, which more than likely caused the blood splatter all over his skin and remaining clothing. But the most grotesque part of the image were his eyelids and mouth, sewn shut with blood trickling down his cheeks and chin. I was appalled at the gruesome sight. My heart was racing, and I would swear to this day that at that moment the dead Mario fell from the top of the screen. I would swear to this day that at the moment the dead Mario fell from the top of the screen that I heard something run into my bedroom. All the hung figures were of Mario, all the exact same, with eyelids and mouth sewn shut, he spelled sewn wrong, and stab wounds all over their bodies. I worked up all the courage I could muster. I again unplugged the N64, which turned off, but not at that instant. Before the screen went black, the hung Mario's face underneath his sewn lips was smirking at us. I didn't want to get up, not even to turn on the light. There were fucking lights! You said that there wasn't a lamp! I wanted to remain in that exact spot sitting down because at least there I felt somewhat safe. But for my girlfriend's sake, I plugged in the lamp and lit the room up. Okay. Whose source? Whatever. Everything was peaceful, perhaps a calm after the storm, and I took a deep breath and sat back down. I couldn't get that image out of my head, that smirk. I felt powerless as to what my mind wanted to remain on. I sat on the floor next to my girlfriend and hugged her, picked her up and took her to bed. Who in the hell would make a game like that? It had to be the game. It had to be hacked. It's the only thing that made any sense to me. What I saw in that game I would define as evil in its sickest form. Fun fact, I watched a video recently where I don't remember who it was that made the video. I think it was Swanky Box, but he was talking about how if he had a time machine, he would go back in time with a hacked cartridge of Mario, like an EverDrive or whatever it is that lets you play mods and hacks on an actual console. He would take that back and rent Mario 64 and replace the rented copy with the modded copy, and that would be how creepypastas got started, except it would be real. That was funny, I thought. Without a word between us, we laid in bed for what felt like hours before one of us finally broke the silence. She told me that she wanted to get rid of that game as soon as possible. As it was already late, I decided that it would be best to wait until tomorrow because I was sure my uncle's store was closed and GameStop doesn't take games that old. Okay, it's night. It's night, you're going to bed. It's that late of night. I don't think GameStop would be open that late. But, whatever. So we stayed in bed and agreed that we would not play that game again. Fuck! I screwed up. I scrolled like all the way up. I want to know. So they stayed in bed for hours without talking because they saw a scary video game? Like, wow. Okay. Anyway. Blah, 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 blah. I couldn't get it. Okay. We would not play the game again. But I couldn't get it out of my head still. I wanted to know why or how this was done. My curiosity got the better of me in the end, and after she had fallen asleep, I quietly got out of bed, went back into the living room, plugged in the N64, and didn't turn it on. Didn't have to. Okay, that was actually a pretty good line! That's pretty good! The game started itself. Oh, well, it would have been better if it was already on, but. And not only that, picked up exactly where it left off. I was astounded by this because I had never seen the N64 do anything like that. I don't think the N64 can do anything like that. I mean, obviously, if you turn the game on, it couldn't, or turn it off and on, it couldn't. Unless I'm not gonna get into that here. Where am I at? I'm so sorry if you if you really wanted to hear like a legitimate reading of this and not just it. If you know who I am, if you follow this YouTube channel, you probably shouldn't have expected that, I guess. Um didn't have to the game started, so I'd never seen the N64 do anything like that. Right then and there, I knew that there was more to this than I knew. Right then and there, I knew that there was more to this than I knew, and I had to know what. I was fascinated. Right then and there, I knew that there was more to this than I knew, and I had to know what. I was fascinated, drawn in, perhaps. I got a good look around the tower. Despite being disgusted, I was morbidly fascinated by the entire scene. The paranoia it could convey was intriguing. After a few moments of looking around, I pressed the pause button and again the screen faded, this time to black. It took me all the way back to the file select screen and found myself with more questions than answers. All the files were back. Again! File 1 had 66 stars, while files 2, 3, and 4 had none. I tried to remember back to when we picked the file, and I was certain that they were not there before. I tried loading file 4 first, and in response, the game showed me a picture of Mario dead in a pool of his own blood with his eyeballs and entrails hanging out. After a shudder, it allowed me to hit B and go back. I tried loading file 3, and again I got another appalling picture. It was Mario, once again staring directly into the screen with bloodshot eyes that looked so close to real that I really thought that they were. His mouth was gaping open and his tongue was missing. Well, it was missing from his mouth at least. I examined further and realized that Mario's tongue was wrapped around his throat and that he was being strangled with it. Whose tongue is that long, dude? Is Mario a frog? I heard a chuckle of. Well, I guess there's a frog Mario in Mario 3, but I don't think that's. I heard a chuckle of sorts. Not from the game, but it sounded like it was directly behind me. I ignored it against my better judgment. I tried to start up file 2 now, and a video began to play. Mario was strapped down on a table in a decrepit version of the castle's entrance hall. There's no apostrophe on castles. The stones were all black, blood oozing from the cracks between each of them. Curtains that hung from the ceilings were tattered. Are there curtains that hang from the ceiling in Mario 64? I don't think so. I also don't think they're stones. I'm pretty sure the walls are made of like painted like blue and green, but the ceilings they appeared to be worn with the years. In the background, Peach and Toadstool were strapped to both sides of the door that led to the basement area. Well, guess what, dude? There's no door that leads to the basement area. There's two doors, and they're on separate sides of the foyer. And they're both single doors, which are the same width as a character model, pretty much. So I don't see how Toad and Mario are strapped to the door when there's two doors that are both really small. Both strapped to both sides of the door that led to the basement area. Toadstool had the mushroom on his head torn off. I could make out his skull showing through the still fresh wound. He was obviously dead. Peach sent me into a state of awe. Her skin was peeled off, and all I could see fully formed was her head, which remained untouched. Jesus Christ, I said silently as the video continued. How do you say something silently, though? I mouthed. I thought. I said silently. Mario struggled for freedom as the door upstairs opened, and a black mass slowly came through. Its footsteps solemnly echoed through the silent hall. The curtains on the ceiling blew casually to its passing as it moved down the steps towards him. Mario pulled and pulled, but found no way to escape the situation that he found himself in. What did he pull on? And in response, he began to beg for his life and pray. The black mass inched ever closer to the hero. It seemed as though Mario gave up. The black mass walked around the table and stopped directly. What table? What the fuck are you talking about? Where did this table come? There's no table in the castle foyer. Again, the hero begged, pleaded for his life. He told the Black Mass that he would do anything, only spare him for any crime that he committed against it. I saw a tear roll down Mario's cheek as he closed his eyes tightly, a rope tied around his neck. He gagged and took in only heavy breaths. I couldn't see a hand so much as touch the rope or where it came from. But it was indeed there, with just enough slack so that Mario could breathe. Deep lacerations cut through Mario's clothes and body by the gallons, covering him a crimson pool. Covered him in a crimson pool. His him? Like the hem of his pants? But him like H-I-M? By the gallons covered him in a crimson pool. He screamed, begged, pleaded, asked for death, but it was not given. I don't think that I just don't think that he could be cut but still breathing. He screamed, begged, pleaded, asked for death, but it was not given to him, not yet anyways. The cuts continued until the cuts continued until the floor was covered in the dark red liquid exuding slowly to the floor. Finally, the swipes and stabs ceased altogether, and there was a deep, methodical silence that only Mario's gasps of misery filled. Before I could so much as think on what I had just seen, his eyes and mouth were forced shut, and I could see it for myself. A black needle going through both of his eyelids and mouth simultaneously. How is a needle going through his eyelids without going into his eye, which would stop the needle? I'm feeling this alcohol, dude. It's hitting me. It's hitting me. Black needle going through his eyelids and mouth simultaneously. Is it summon his whole face together? What the fuck? Effectively silencing him other than his muffled screams. Even more blood came from the fresh wounds and covered up his face. The rope tightened around Mario's neck, although he made no effort to escape it. It was over. After a few short grunts, Mario was silent altogether, with not so much a breath or a movement. His face was terror personified, and even though this is a video game, the pain one would have to endure, the torture, my God. Again, before the screen faded to black, the Mario smirked at me. I sat in silence. The title screen with Mario's head came up on screen, only it wasn't the same Mario. The background was all black, and the Mario was the same Mario from the scene that I had just watched. He had that smirk still on. Still on. He still smirked. After much debate, I decided to keep going. Much debate? I decided to keep going. I went to the file select screen, and with all the courage that my heart could muster, I loaded file 1, 66 stars. The game loaded to a demonic laugh and a black sky filled with blood-red clouds. Repeatedly, I could hear a dark, brooding voice say, "Game over." Game over? Like Mario would after you lost all your lives. When you lose all your lives, Mario was literally like, "Game over." So is he hearing a demonic voice going, a brooding voice going, "Game over, game over, game over, game over." I don't know if I can finish this in one drink, but. I like how this alcoholic beverage says contains alcohol on the bottom. Anyway, where was I at? Game over, like Mario. What if you lost? The Mario that I was controlling was the same Mario that I had seen killed on the title screen. The screen where you select the title select screen, not the file select screen. The title select screen. Even though the Mario screen isn't the title screen, it's after the title screen. Screams, torment, bodies littered the pathway to the castle. The bodies of Peach, several toadstools, not toads, but toadstools. And at the end, a dead Bowser, whose head was missing and whose body was impaled on a pike! Right outside of the bridge. Bowser! No! He was impaled on a pike! Bowser with no head! That's ridiculous, dude. It reminds me of that comic. Have you guys seen that comic where Mario's like, Luigi's like, "No, Mario, he can't eat anymore." And Mario's like, "Then I'll make him digest them." And he cuts Bowser's stomach open and puts a fucking a 1-up in it, and he goes back to life. And then Mario shoots him in the head, and then he puts another 1-up in his stomach, and Bowser's like, "Luigi, please help me." It's so fucked up, and now Bowser's got no head, and he's impaled on a pike. This is so fucking wacky as shit, dude. I entered the castle and found myself back at Big Boo's haunt. I didn't question it anymore, I just went with it. The scene had not changed, not even slightly. And ignoring all the graphic details, I entered the mansion to what I was sure would strike my heart in some way, shape, or form. What? I could feel something. Something circling and enclosing around me. I ignored it. I had to. I needed to know I needed to know what this was and what was going on. Something whispered in my ear. I was sure of it. I gulped as the screen transitioned to the entrance hall of Big Boo's haunt, the room with all the doors. The bodies of faceless Mario were hung all over the ceiling, illuminated only by torches. At least it's not lamps that you can't plug in because you don't have any more outlets in the room. And no ceiling light. Whose living room doesn't have a ceiling light or more than 2 outlets, dude? This is ridiculous. I love it. I fucking love this story, dude. This is the best story I've ever read. I could feel sweat trickling down the back of my neck as I saw a standalone figure all the way on the upper balcony. All the way. That room's not very big, dude. You can get up there. Upper balcony. I moved Mario slowly towards it. I was afraid. Why move Mario towards it at all? You can see it in the room. That room's not that big. You can see pretty much the whole thing on one screen. Why move Mario towards it? I'm more than willing to admit that, and I have never been more afraid in my life. I jumped up the steps, one at a time, moving cautiously and carefully. It was another hung man. That was for certain. But who it was, I'll never forget. Oh God, is it gonna be him? Please be him. I'm begging you, dude. Please. I jumped up the steps one at a time, moving cautiously and carefully. As another man, I never certain, but who it was, I'll never forget. As I reached the body, I hesitated, but zoomed in on it. I began to tremble, my hands barely holding the controller. The figure was indeed a man hung by the rope. The figure was indeed a man hung by a rope. The man had his eyes and mouth sewn shut, just like Mario, and was bleeding profusely from his eye sockets. He doesn't have sockets if they're sewed shut, right? The man, in all of his pain, was me! Yay! I knew it was gonna be him, dude. I called it. That's drink worthy, dude. He let out a scream. Something haunting and bone-chilling. Bone-chilling?! A wail like nothing that I had ever heard before. The screen began to flicker and turn to... I can't even do it, dude! The screen began to flicker and turn to static. I tried to turn off the system. I tried to unplug it, and nothing worked. The TV wouldn't even turn off! I saw my corpse that was screaming through the static, burning as its haunting wail. He spelled whale wrong. He spelled it like whale, the country Wales. Had yet to cease. Mario turned his head 180 degrees and looked at the screen with a smirk on his face and let out a wail, just like I did. My head began to hurt and throb. I fell to the floor, and the last thing that I remember from that night was seeing a black mass hovering over me. That's the end, dude. That's Mario 64 Damned, Part 1. Should I just fucking read the next part now, or should I clickbait the shit out of this and make it a fucking... I know the second part's way longer, and it's way more violent. Like, way more violent, but... Where's it at? I can't find it. Oh, I didn't type in damned. No, dude. Oh, yeah, okay, so that was Mario 64 Damned. This is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Damned. And again, there's no author, and this is, oh my god, this is so much longer. This is like way longer. Ugh. Good thing I'm already like drunk. Fuck it. I'm gonna take a break and come back and read it in a little bit. Interesting. All right. So I took a little break and I have my second pint opened up. I should have like started the video with me opening it, but you know, it's fine. Here's a victory. Blech. I just ate a bowl of popcorn and hot Cheetos. So yeah, basically I'm on the road to getting this story right. This story is significantly longer. This is the one, I don't know if this is written by the same person or not, because there's no author information on either of them. So, anyway, this is Ocarina of Time, Damned. The evil has returned, and I fear that things are far worse than any soul on this world can comprehend. There is a haunting of sorts, yes, and it is the most evil thing on this earth, this world, is what it should have said. I don't think that I'll last much longer. I feel as though my fate was determined the moment that I purchased the Nintendo 64. I shall continue from where I left off. I fell to the ground, covering my ears as the haunting scream stabbed into my mind like a rusty knife. I laid there, kicking and screaming, my eyes locked onto something standing above me, the same black mass that I had seen torturing Mario, that had been torturing me, was there. Everything in entire room turned to black. Its face was that of a young male, though cloaked in shadow. That much was clear. He wore a smirk that made me feel both terror and anger. He was mocking me, treating me like a simple plaything. After that, I remember losing consciousness and nothing short of nightmares. Oh boy, here we go. This is whenever I said at the very beginning of part 1 that this story is like extremely violent. This is the one where it gets like turned up to 11. The Mario one wasn't even nothing compared to this one. I walked down a flight of stony stairs, moving slowly through the shadows, surrounded from both sides by a wall that followed me all the way down. Both sides were lit slightly by torches. As I descended, I could hear painful, blood-curdling screams. The sounds of splattering blood was eerily complemented with a deadly silence after. As I moved further down, I heard a woman's voice calling for mercy. She begged for death. "I'll do it myself if you want. Just please, no more," she sobbed. "I just can't take it anymore." After a while, I could no longer hear her voice, and once again, the silence set me on edge. It took me a while to realize that I had no control over my functions and movements. Only my mind belonged solely to me. I remember thinking that I was being controlled by something, especially once I noticed that a black mist surrounded me. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I smirked as I entered through the large door at the end of the small hallway. The room was almost pitch black, but 2 torches at the very end of the room showed me a man that stood high above head with a rope wrapped around his neck and hands bound behind his back. He was suspended in midair, floating in the darkness. I grinned and walked up to him. "How did I get here?" the old man asked while he struggled to get free. Nothing held him, at least nothing that I could see, but it appeared that he had trouble with every movement that he made, and I couldn't make out his face, although his face sounded awfully familiar, which scared me even more. Suddenly the silence was broken like a knife upon skin with hundreds, no thousands of agonizing screams. Most of them, if not all of them, were painful to even listen to. It was a massacre, certainly. I tried to cover my ears, but I could not make the slightest movement. I just got a Snapchat. I also felt amused by this. Like some other side of me loved listening to the death screams of all those people. I was bloodthirsty. The screams continued for several... I just got a Snapchat again. The screams continued for several minutes until there was nothing left but crying. A little girl's. And I wasn't mistaken. Or just a little girl's, and I wasn't mistaken. The old man screamed, "Please let me out of here." I wouldn't let him go, though. His fate already belonged to me. Like a lightning bolt, I was in front of him. I drove something sharp, I don't even know what it was, into his chest. He bled all over, but not a drop of blood so much as touched me. I pulled it from his chest, and then again I jabbed it into his body. I did it again, and again, and again, and once more for fun. I tightened the rope, choking him for a moment, moved closer to his face, and smelled the fear on his body. I forced his eyes closed, drove a needle into his eyelid and through his pupil so that he may bleed some more. I sewed both of his eyes shut along with his mouth. I drew back so that I may watch my favorite part. The rope dropped and snapped his neck instantly. Everything from there on seems like a blur to me. That's all I can remember. As I wrote that, I felt something dark coming over me. I can't explain what or why. I just wish I could have done something to save him now, you see. It was more than just any dream, more than a nightmare. Now that I know the truth, I must dwell in my own regret. What? I woke up in bed and I was not sure of how I had got there. When I passed out of the living room, I sat up instantly. When I had passed out, I was not sure how I had got there when I passed out in the living room. Okay, in bed. I get it. I sat up instantly and looked around the room. The clock read 11:15 a.m. My girlfriend was standing in the doorway, just staring at me. "What's wrong?" I asked her. I didn't get an immediate response. There was a vacancy in her eyes, as if she was hypnotized, and it made me question if it were really her. I asked her if she was okay. Again, I got no response. When she finally spoke, all she said to me was, "I'm in a Zelda mood. Let's play Zelda." I was very confused by this because we had agreed the night prior to take the system and the game back. When I reminded her of this, she said, "Don't be silly. Why would I want to take it back when we were having so much fun? Come on, I want to play Ocarina of Time. It's your favorite, isn't it?" She walked into the living room on her own. I couldn't help but notice her eyes. Naturally, they were hazel green, but today they looked dark, black almost. I stood from my bed and walked into the room where she held out Ocarina of Time to me. As much as I love Ocarina, I told her just to wait a little while. I used the bathroom, brushed my teeth, showered, changed, and even though she told me to hurry every 5 minutes or so, I was ready in about half an hour. I didn't want to play Nintendo 64. Not after all that had happened last night. I told her what I had done after she had gone to bed and everything that had happened. "I know," she told me. "I know everything." I asked her how, but she just laughed and gave me the game. She commanded me to play. The console still had Super Mario 64 in it. I knelt down and I felt another presence move swiftly across the room. I turned around to look. The apartment had become darker, like night had already settled in. It was only noon. She asked me what was wrong. I told her nothing and not to worry. "Just tired," I explained. Something was not right. It was like she was a completely different person entirely. I turned on the Nintendo 64 with Mario still in it. Nothing came on, even though she told me how she wanted to play Ocarina, and I turned it on with Mario in it because that's clever. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Doesn't it, dude? Nothing came on, the screen remained black. I tried it a few times. I wanted to see what came up when I started the game. It just refused to start. Finally, I took the game out, and as I put the Ocarina of Time into the system, I could hear a voice saying something to me. It was like when you think to yourself, but it wasn't anything that came from my own thoughts. I remember it well, telling me to enjoy the game. It's my favorite too. Unwillingly, I started the game. I felt cold as a strong breeze passed through the room like a winter blast. A shiver went down my spine. My girlfriend sat next to me, very close to my side. The iconic title screen was skipped. It went straight to the file select screen. Oh, so you got file select right this time, but not title select screen. I had a file on the game that had everything finished. Hearts, medallions, side quests. Everything was done. It was gone, replaced by a file that didn't say link like I often use, but the name of the file was Death. This made me feel even more uncomfortable. Wait, the name on the file was Death. Okay, that was OTT. OTT's not on anymore. OTT is what you use when you're making like dubstep noises, by the way. That's what you use to make them go. Okay. I felt cold as a strong breeze passed down the room like a winter blast. A shiver went down my spine. My girlfriend sat next to me, very close to my side. Oh, okay. This made me feel even more uncomfortable than I had already been. My girlfriend, being more adventurous than usual, told me to load the file. I put my thumb on the A button, but hesitated. I knew full well that I was in for more head games, and I feared what may have come from it. She pushed the A button for me and looked at me with a devilish smile. There you go, she told me. I focused my attention on the game. I was greeted with Child Link at the Sacred Forest Meadow. Child Link can't load in the Great Forest Meadow, but. And at first, everything appeared normal. The hearts were all there, and he held Kokiri's sword and Deku's shield. The calm before the storm, I thought to myself. I began to look around the area and found nothing out of the ordinary except Saria, whom usually sat at the tree stump when you visit this area as a child, was missing from her place. I moved the stump to examine it more when I heard a laugh come from the game. I turned Link around as fast as I could move my fingers. Standing in the center of the Sacred Forest Meadow was Ocarina of Time's antagonist, Ganondorf. I don't know why he said it like that. Ganondorf. He had the image he bore when you confronted him as adult Link. Dang, he had locks, dude. He had a mane. I suppose that you expected more from the. Oh, this is again. I suppose that you expected more from this, didn't you? More blood, perhaps? I tried to attack him, but my Kokiri's sword went right through him. Dang, dude, you cut through him like butter. A foolish effort. You're in my world now. The screen was full of static, although I could still make out Link through it all. The forest, once green and vibrant, was now a mere shadow of its former self. The ground was burned and cracked, flames spewing through them in an unholy blaze. The sky had a dark red hue to it. And was covered in pure smoke which came from a small village below. Link walked through the lost woods. The trees were all dead and had people hanging from them by rope, some with their necks snapped. But there were also people inside the trees, people who reached out, limbs resembling branch. That's kind of fucking badass, actually. Like, that's like a badass metal album cover. People who reached out, limbs resembling branches, grabbing hold of Link's arm and pulling him, forcing the legendary hero to pull away with all the might that he had. His shocked expression was nothing more than fear of the unknown. As Link began to, not fear of the fucking tree people grabbing him, fear of the unknown. Okay. As Link began to move away, more hanging bodies fell from the trees, all surrounding Link in a complete circle. I lived a religious life, please spare me, the voice of a woman above called out. I don't deserve this, please. A man screamed in pain and struggled with his rope. As I got a good look around, I noticed the same scene on nearly every tree all over the woods. Limbs from the ground grabbed onto Link's feet. They began to claw and tear at him, ripping his tunic to shreds and disarming him of his sword and shield. I could see Link fighting. I button mashed to try to help, but my aid was to no avail. I watched as Link's legs were torn from his body first, with blood spewing from the fresh wounds in small hose-like blasts. I could see the veins as they stuck from the hole and parts of bone now drenched by blood. Then it was his arms, ripped off in a matter of mere seconds. Now the same image as his legs. Finally, they ripped his heads off. I was given the game over screen with the sad music playing, only this time it was complemented with a cruel laugh. I resumed playing. Through the foggy screen, I saw fire raining from the sky, but inside the fire were people burning as they fell from the heavens, their screams echoing from the heavens all the way to hell. These were once the Kokiri. I watched as they dropped into the Kokiri forest, and people who looked to be from my world. Dare I question my sanity at this time? I watched as the Kokiri, all dressed in black robes, forced innocent people onto spikes. Their blood splattered all over their faces and clothes. Scariest thing is that they all remained alive through the ultimate impalement and were left to suffer there. Too bad Bowser didn't stay alive through the impalement. Then I got a view of Link standing before the great Deku tree. All of his leaves were dead. The original brownish color of the tree was turned to black. Its dark eyes had red circles dwelling deep within, and from them poured blood tears. The great Deku tree's dead in Ocarina of Time, but hanging far above in the Deku tree's branches were all the Kokiri, not the ones I had already seen. These were the real ones from the actual game. The cloaked ones I had seen were merely a darker version of them. They were joined by real people, or people that appeared to be real, who were the only ones that struggled and screamed. In the center of the Kokiri hung Saria. I was wrong. She was the only one that was alive, and like all the real people, she had crows pecking at her body, eating her alive. I watched as one ripped out her eyeball and devoured it without a second thought. Jeez, dude. I felt sick to my stomach. Blood dripped all over the ground where I saw one more cloaked Kokiri-like figure standing beneath the Deku tree. Ugh. Ugh. I felt compelled to move forward to see who this creature was. I pushed the analog stick forward and walked up to the demon. He held in his hands a scythe of sorts. Perhaps this was death. He moved to look at me. It was Mito. His face was decrepit and destroyed, black and cracked with glowing red like the Deku trees. I drew Link back as quickly as I could, but in that exact instant I saw Mito took his scythe and dove it through Link's chest. Dove it, Yug! The blood stuck through his back. His heart was sliced into pieces. Link dropped to both knees, not just one. He wasn't getting married. And looked straight into Mito's demonic eyes. I saw him lift Link like he was nothing at all and hold him into the air. He pulled the scythe up. The blade cut through his body as if he were a piece of wet tissue, straight through the hero's head. The scythe was removed in the most gruesome style imaginable. Ugh. I really hope that, never mind. I could see, I hope no girls are listening to this that, have a thing for me, because they're going to hear me, burping and shit all nastily. I could see Link's brain matter thrown about carelessly, his split in two skull through the intense amount of blood that streamed from his body. The game over screen returned, but this time no music played. There was only a evil laugh that penetrated my heart. The game resumed itself this time. The static soon vanished from the screen, and I was greeted with an eerie scene. I got a full view, a Hyrule field engulfed in realistic flames. Smoke and screams filled the air in satanic fashion. A swirling black cloud cloaked the world in shadow, with a red moon shining through every moment or so. The camera moved forward to show me hundreds among hundreds of dead bodies littering the once brilliant fields with their bloody corpses. They all looked lifelike, and not one of them were on any game that I had ever seen. The river that once went from Hyrule Castle all the way to Zora's Domain was filled not with water, but pure blood. Bodies were forced face down into the hellish Crimson River with the appearance of having been drowned there. Is that a Is that a pun? The bodied the bodied seemed to twitch and move like they were fighting to live once again. Finally, the camera took me down towards the drawbridge that went to, like also TOO, Hyrule Castle Market. There, surrounded by here we go, surrounded by pikes which held the impaled skeletal remains of what was once people, was adult Link, standing mightily as lord of this realm. His tunic had been turned to black, and his eyes glowed a fierce, bright red. He wore an evil grin on his face. In his left hand, he held a demonic version of the Master Sword. The blade had become more jagged. The handle area was black, and blood dripped from the entire sword. Not just the blade, but the handle as well. He was the reason for the massacre that I had heard in my dream. He had become a demonic shadow of what he once was. Link was death. Death. It was at that time that I felt drawn in. Like something had been. Oh, how far into this am I? 21 minutes? Jeez. Something had been pulling me into the game itself. It sounds insane, I know, but it's the truth. I looked around at the world I was in now. This was hell given in the form of a once great classic video game. This was this was hell given in the form of a once great classic video game. That is the fucking best line I've ever read. This was hell in the form of a once great classic video game. No fucking way this guy wrote that sentence, dude. This was hell, given in the form of a once comment that. Commented under this video. Commented. Every comment needs to be this was hell in the form of a once great classic video game. I can't believe I just read that, dude. That's a real sentence that someone wrote. I love it. This is the greatest story I've ever read. I'm not even being sarcastic. I genuinely love what I'm reading. Okay. Let's go. I stood in Link's place. I had total control of his body. I kept the satanic Master Sword in hand. Although I was certain this wouldn't help much here. I couldn't think. I had to act. I surveyed the horror around me. Each body that I saw, each that lied there dead surrounding me, all had horrified, painful looks on their faces. Some had their jaws pushed so far down their throat, like look over there, throats that I was certain they had choked on them. Some were decapitated with blood still squirting from the veins in their necks. I looked out away from the market and saw somebody over by the Lon Lon Ranch entrance. I went, although terrified, to investigate. Stepping on the bodies and through the blood that covered the field. The person in the game was a little girl, resting on both knees, covering her face with blood-stained hands. She wore a pink dress similar to that of Zelda's. She looked so lifelike. I immediately recognized her, crying from my dream. Undoubtedly. She looked up at me, removing her hands from her face. Blood covered her clothes and tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please," she begged. "I've been here for so long. Can you help me? My parents are gone and I don't know what to do. I just want to go home." I knelt down to her. I was I was not sure if this was some kind of trick or if she was really somebody that needed my help. I held out my hand, but once our hands touched, I was pushed back by an awesome force, thrown like a feather in the wind. When I hit the ground, I rolled over, bodies of the dead. My favorite control in Ocarina of Time is when you can make Link kneel down and reach his hand out during a text box when somebody is talking. But apparently, these N64 characters are fucking talking like out loud in real time, and their character models are moving around in real time. I had blood covering my body entirely. I could hear the little girl screaming as loud as I believed she could. What the fuck does that even mean? Help, somebody help. I pushed myself to my feet and rushed to her, but I was too late. She was hung on a rope with stab wounds that penetrated. Jesus, dude! Her cute eyes were sewn shut along with her mouth. Blood dripped from her body into the pool under her feet. The rope appeared to go nowhere at all. She just hung there with nothing to support her. I backed away from her body when I saw something moving behind her. Materializing from the shadows was the black mass that was plaguing my life. This was my first confrontation with the creature that had killed Mario before my eyes. That's a fucking crazy sentence, too. I can't believe it. Hell in the form of a once great classic fucking video game. And this was my confrontation with the creature that had killed Mario before my eyes. It sounds like Luigi in a war game. I could see only a pair of bright red eyes from the shadow. I got lost. Where am I? After a moment or so, he again revealed his features to me. I backed away. I looked at my sword, then back at him. I stared into his red eyes in fear, and he returned the look with satisfaction on his face. I don't know what came over me. I tried to attack him, to fight back, but I suffered the same horrid fate as all those before me. He simply knocked me aside, throwing me back into the litter of dead bodies. What was that thing? Who was he? Why was he doing this to me? I felt my head throbbing. I came back to reality for a moment. He was doing something to me. I had to fight it. I couldn't let him hurt me. I understood then why this system and game were returned so often. Just now? You just now get it? The game itself was just like any normal game. It was the system that was haunted. Something had possessed the Nintendo 64, and I was the unfortunate one to receive it. Dear God, did my uncle know about this? Did he know there was more to this system than meets the eye? Is he the cause of all this? Are you fucking kidding me? Did your uncle? He told you that people said it was made in hell. There had to be a way to stop it. I dropped the controller and staggered to my feet. I walked into the bedroom and grabbed my phone off of the charger. I tried calling his cell phone. No answered. Then I tried his store phone. Again, nobody answered. Finally, I called his house phone. There was an answer this time, but it wasn't my uncle. Play the game, it told me. It's our favorite. The phone hung up. I looked at my cell. I no longer had signal. I needed to find my uncle. Maybe he knew more about this. I hurried to the door, removed the chain lock, turned the doorknob, and the door was jammed. Oh my fucking gosh! This is the best! It appeared that I was trapped here in the place I had once called home and felt my safest. He's gone. No need to worry about him. My girlfriend walked up behind me and said, I believe that we were in the middle of something. I turned around and looked into her black eyes. I asked her who she really was. Accusing her of being someone else entirely, I asked her what she had done to my uncle. How can you say such a thing? She laughed. Who else would I be? Baby, don't worry about anything. We're having fun, right? Playing your favorite game, so let's keep going. I sure hope that there is so much more for us. I'm sure that there is so much more for us to see. I told her to go to hell in a fit of rage, and she slapped me in my face. She demanded me to play the game. Her voice grew more deep. The only word to describe the way she sounded at that precise moment was demonic. Like the devil had taken full control for a slight moment. I had no choice. I walked back into the living room. Before I started the game, I checked my phone one more time for signal. Then something caught my attention. I didn't believe what I was seeing. Oh my fucking gosh. I read the date on my phone. It was impossible. I purchased and played the Nintendo 64 on May 31st, 2012. According to this, it was July 18th, 2012. There was no conceivable way. I still don't have any idea what this could mean. Had I almost lost 2 months of time, I would have asked my girlfriend, but she was gone. She was now the shell for the monster that had ruined my life. I threw my phone against the wall. The back and battery both separated from it as it went to the floor. I returned to the living room and sat down and returned to my game as if I had a choice in the matter. I wonder, July 18th, so that would be 7/18. 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. Now, July shouldn't really matter there because that's not the 6th month, I don't think. I think it's July, January, February, March, April, May, June. June is the 6th month. July is the 7th month. But 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. So I wonder if that's going to be important. I remained to Hyrule Field, a world that had been burned and destroyed. Everything had gone quiet. A sense of calm began to overtake me, and I felt sort of relieved. That feeling left me when I took a look at the death surrounding me. The sword was lost to me. I no longer had it in my possession. Something appeared in front of me. It was Navi the fairy. Hey! Link's guide in the game, but she was very different than I previously remembered. Personally, I expected her to say, hey, listen. But I got nothing except a cold voice that specifically demanded that I follow her. I took in a deep breath. I expected the worst to come out of this. The bodies all burned in the flames, and I could smell the charred corpses as their flesh turned to ash in the everlasting inferno. Oh my gosh, dude, this is crazy. The screams returned, the bodies themselves came to life, yelling out in misery, struggling in their damnation. They had been reborn and were once more being tortured. We're about halfway done with this now, by the way. The bodies of the drowned victim as well returned to life, only to drown over and over and over again. I followed Navi through the flames, hands and teeth grabbing a hold of my clothes, pulling me into the fire and burning me at some points. I had no choice but to either kick them or pull away. I didn't want to suffer the same fate as them. What kind of person am I that I wouldn't even help them, though? Perhaps I just thought it was too late for them. She took me all the way to Kakariko Village, which too had seen its demise. The buildings had all collapsed into themselves, leaving some crushed under the rubble. I could hear slight screams coming from beneath the destruction. destruction. All the video game characters from this town in the market would greet me here. Well, not all. Some insist on crouching around the rubble and sipping the blood that seeped through. Their clothes were torn to pieces and were stained by blood. Their skin had a grayish tint, with flesh dying and falling from them, leaving large cracks all over their bodies. They looked at me with ghoulish eyes that glowed bright yellow. As I followed Navi through the town, they followed me. Groaning and limping, a woman called out to me, "Filthy pig, we will enjoy ripping your flesh to shreds, then feasting on it before your eyes." What the fuck? A male voice sprang out, "You will get what you deserve, you sickening creature, you and the rest of your kind." I stopped at a display so disgusting that I couldn't help but look. All the carpenters were eating a man, woman, and child alive. It took all of my will not to break down and lose my sanity at that point at video game characters, at 64-bit polygonal designs doing weird shit. Blood dripped from their cheeks and jaws. One in particular stood out the most to me. As it took from the child his liver, it began to chew on it like a dog chews a bone. "Just a sample of what my world truly is," a voice said within my head. "This is what all your kind deserves." Navi told me to follow or end up like them. I chose to follow. As I looked around, I saw others all held down with chains as they were devoured bite by bite. I think I began to understand what sort of place this was, or at least what it was meant to resemble. Hell, are you fucking... The part that got to me the most was that a lot of them, if not most of them, were children. Why would any child be condemned to this horrid place? Actually, does anyone truly deserve a fate such as this? I couldn't help but wonder what made me so special above these people. Why am I not subjected to the same torture just like them? I resisted the questioning and just felt a slight relief that I wasn't in their, as in over there, position. For now, anyways. Unsurprisingly, she led me to the graveyard. A storm began. A strong breeze began to sweep through the cemetery. Rain poured by the foot, and lightning controlled the sky as if it were all planned out. What the fuck does that even mean? Thankfully, the residents of Kakariko didn't follow me all the way up here. All the way up here. My eyes wandered around the cemetery. I could no longer see Navi. It appeared she had done what she was supposed to do. Is that lore accurate? Like when fairies serve their purpose, they disappear? The graveyard itself was well kept, but nonetheless... Isn't that nonetheless one word? Why is that 3 words there? Nonetheless, appeared far darker than before. Shadow covered the entire area. Shadow covered the entire area, even when lightning made it claim over the sky. Something was moving in the darkness. Something or everything. I could not be certain. My eyes were not playing tricks on me. I was sure of that. So you couldn't be certain, but you were sure of that. Whispers in the dark called out to me, and I was compelled to look at the very first gravestone. The big one, right up front. I crouched down and read, "Here lies my loving parents. Those who criticized me, destroyed me, ruined me. Enjoy your eternity in a hell of your own design." I stood up slowly, unsure of what it truly meant. Something ran across from the shadows behind me. I instinctively turned around. Nothing could be made out because everything had become even darker. Eyes were all on me from all over. There was a whisper in my ear, "Find a way out, because this place... blah, blah. Find a way out. Escape this place while your life is still yours to keep." I don't like the sound of my whisper voice. It's scary when my my own ears like this with headphones on. This is some ASMR shit, dude. I felt its hand grip my shoulders. I turned and shoved it away and moved back into the shadows whence it came. I couldn't breathe. I was so terrified, so scared that words could not express what I was feeling. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My heartbeat intensified by at least 10 times. Are you fucking serious? The normal person's heart rate is mine's usually about 75, 80. 10 times? Your heart rate's probably already at least 90 to 100 at this point. 10 times? Your heart rate's 1,000? What's 1,000 heart rate? Are you fucking kidding me? You would have died, you fucking idiot. A powerful mist began to swirl through the entire area like a vortex of despair. That's a fucking badass Megadeth album song. And through it I could make out the figures that stalked the cemetery, the spirits that then seemed to haunt every aspect of my nightmares. The whispers continued. I began to move through the cemetery, and it seemed as though they grew louder. With every step that I took, I examined each gravestone as best I could through my paranoia. My body kept turning itself around in a kind of instinct that begged for my own safety, and my eyes continually searched the cemetery with all intents of seeing every detail of what went on around me. I came to another gravestone that stood out to me. Here lies my sweet innocent sister, who suffers now as my parents do for the sins that she had committed against me. My mind was filled with images from the little girl outside of the Lon Ranch. Was she the sister that the gravestone spoke out of with so much anger? Poor little girl. It brought a tear to my eye when I thought about it. I had no time to grieve over her then, but thinking about it at that moment just got to me. This was the first real emotion I felt that wasn't fear or terror in what felt like forever. I could feel the presence of several beings standing directly behind me, each having their, as in over there, eyes on me. I walked away from the gravestone, and soon I found myself at the very back of the cemetery, where the biggest gravestone of all loomed over all the others. This one was very different. It was colored black, unlike the others that were all gray. Okay, this one was black, the others were all gray, and the words were embedded in blood red. I knelt down and read the grave. It said both mine and my girlfriend's names. I stammered to my feet. I began to feel dizzy. I heard her call out to me. My girlfriend, undoubtedly, it was her. I looked around, I screamed for her, asked where she was. I got no response. She's mine now, a voice in my head told me. I have a present for you, my friend, for being such good company. I noticed that in the very back of the cemetery, where the shadow temple was located, there was now a black door. Come, I can't wait for you to see it. I walked through the mist, finding it within myself to ignore the spirits as they begged me not to go. I went through the door, I guess apart, as in ripped apart. Of me just didn't care anymore. The steps from my dreams. The dark staircase with the torches on both sides. The steps that were never mentioned in this story beforehand, I don't think. No question about it. I descended in shadow. Everything seemed so quiet, it terrified me. This was the first time that I had known pure silence since I had come to this evil place. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I was in the Bongo Boss Room. Nothing sounds as intimidating as Bongo Boss Room. This was the same dark room that I had seen in the nightmare. It's not what I pictured, but okay. Did you know that if you hit Bongo's hand with an ice arrow, that his other hand will start punching the other hand? Like that? I never knew that. But that also meant, as I recalled looking up, yes, the same man was there, hanging in midair, strung on the rope, with his hands and with his arms and legs all held out. There were patches of skin missing from his body, and he was covered in blood, similarly to everything else that I had seen here. I recognized him. I knew who he was, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Real people were being brought here and were being subjected to a hell unlike anything I have ever seen. I called out to him, and he looked at me with bloody eyes. He asked me who I was. "It's me, Uncle," I told him. He obviously knew who I was when he saw me, so why did he ask? "Because you're Link, you fucking idiot." "Then you are free," he said. "Leave this place. Now. Do not stay here. You need to get out of here. He has a plan for you. You cannot stay here." I asked him what he meant. Before he could answer, something came from the ceiling, snake-like. It was the black mass, and it surrounded my uncle. I heard him screaming as loud as a man his age could. As loud as a man his age could. That's drink worthy. So did he scream slightly louder or quieter or what? It's like the third solid gold line I've read. I don't think this is the same story that I read like forever ago, by the way. This is very similar though. But I'm like 3/4 of the way done, and I haven't even got to anywhere near the fucked up levels of the story I'm thinking of is. You cannot stay here. I asked what he meant. Before he could answer, something came to the scene and said it was a black mass and it surrounded my uncle. I heard him screaming as loud as a man's age could, wailing in mortal terror and pain. I could no longer see him through the mist, but I still called out to him. When the mass moved aside, finally, I got a full view of my uncle, skinned alive with holes underneath the muscle. I could see his innards. His intestines hung from him and swung around back and forth like the wind as it caressed a flag. A long tear on the left side of his chest exposed his stopped heart, which appeared to have been punctured several times by a knife or other sharp object. Or other sharp object. "Observe," a voice said. My uncle, he came back to life as I watched as everything repaired itself, skin and all. What kind of game was this? Everything appeared normal when I examined him until I saw a sword driven through his abdomen from behind and pulled swiftly to the right. His legs hung there, and the black mass allowed him to simply bleed out. I told the mass to stop in a fury, and he severed its arm in defiance. He then proceeded to throw my uncle's arm directly at my feet. I was powerless to stop this torture. My uncle told me to run, so I did. I ran back up the stairs through the air and found myself in an icy world. Zora's domain had become far more sinister and cruel, like the Kokiri Forest in Kakariko. The Zoras had been turned into a sort of blood demon monsters that were comprised entirely of blood. Like you see with the adult Link, the entire area was turned to ice, only this was far worse than I could have pictured it as a kid. Where the main source of water should have been, I saw men and women all turned to ice, frozen in eternal cold. Their punishment is to freeze for eternity and have limbs destroyed over and over again, the voice told me. I asked what these people had done to deserve such a fate for the crime of being human. For the crime of being human? What a reason for such a punishment. On the ceiling and the sides of the domain, icicles stuck out, each with 2 or 3 impaled marks. That's pretty fucking cool, I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty badass. This is like some Devil May Cry God of War shit. Their blood frozen with the intense cold. I too felt the misery of this place and its temperature. I felt the longer I stood there, the more I watched the cold I would be to freezing eternally. I don't fucking. I gotta turn the gate up. This fucking microphone's being ridiculous, dude. Okay. No, it's still doing it. Whatever. I'm tired. I don't want to fucking. This story's still going. The story is they amuse themselves by smashing limbs off and allowing their blood to freeze at their feet. Imagine standing there, frozen, while these monsters mutilated your body. Ruto, the Zora princess, was the leader here. Her very touch drenched everything in blood. Her very touch drenched anything in blood. Even the large hammer that she held. He smashed a defenseless the Zora princess. He smashed a defenseless woman to pieces with one mighty swing. Her head rolled towards me, and I looked, and I could see her eyes moving. Though her face expressionless, I could see the fear within her. Ruto held out her hand, and the woman's head rolled towards her. The demonic Zora princess then proceeded to dig her hands into the eyes and poke her fingers into the woman's eyes. When she took out her fingers, what the woman's eyes were sticking to them, torn out in the most gruesome fashion I could imagine. That's pretty fucking gross, dude. Yuck. I rushed through Zora's domain. I just ran. I didn't care anymore. I sprinted as fast as I could until I stopped at the Zora King's chamber. He become nothing more than a pure glutton. So nothing changed. He sat on his usual throne and feasted like the other Zoras. He had become a blood demon. He was surrounded by chunks of flesh, heads that screamed for my help, and limbs that twitched. I watched as he ate the fingers off of one hand. The crunching of the bones drove me mad. The king shall feast for eternity. I just continued moving through the world, leaving through the exit behind King Zora's domain, even though it's a dead end in the game. What the fuck? Goron Village was no better than the Zora's domain. Goron Village isn't back there. In fact, it's kind of on the other side of the map. Drink time. It had become a den of evil. Okay, this is the story I remember. This is the part I remember reading way back then. It had become a den of evil. The entire village was engulfed in a blue flame that gave forth no illumination and inspired only more chaos. There were bodies piled in the flames, each screaming for their skin would be both frozen and burned eternally. From the ceiling hung tens of thousands of people, but not by rope, but by one another. They were frozen together, hanging from the person above. Each appeared to be in the fetal position. There was a large hole in the ceiling where I saw with my own two eyes the big Goron that lived at the top of Death Mountain. There's two big Gorons, but okay. He sat under the black sky. There's no sky in Goron City, bro. That's not there. It's in a cave. And a burning halo, which also had people within it. That's kind of badass. Spinning in a constant circle that not only burned the flesh from them, but severed arms and one leg. Arms and leg. The Goron reached down, picking up all the people at his feet, and laughed before he proceeded to eat them alive. Imagine being digested for all eternity. These gluttons deserve... Okay, it's quote. Imagine being digested for all of eternity, period. And then there's a line, so it goes to the next paragraph. These gluttons deserve such a fate, unquote. I looked down to the bottom floor where the big Goron statue once was. Darunia sat down on a throne made of human flesh and watched as his brothers literally tore human after human, man, woman, anybody down there that was not a Goron into several pieces. Darunia moved from his throne, carrying with him over his left shoulder a battle axe. With mighty force, he proceeded to chop everybody into pieces. Blue fire began to rain from seemingly out of nowhere and burned the remains into ash. Blue fire began to rain from seemingly out of nowhere and burned the remains into ash. Great sentence. With a wave of his hand, the ashes turned into the very people that he had just mutilated, reborn into hell. Darunia looked up and stared directly at me. He told me to leave this forsaken place or suffer like the rest of the humans brought into this damnation. I obliged and left through the opening that once went into the Lost Woods. Gerudo Fortress was now the home of many tortured souls and spirits. I walked through the area ever carefully. The black mass, my guide through this soulless place, spoke to me at every turn. My second favorite place in all the world. There's no laugh. When I walked up the stairs from where I had first come in, I was greeted by even more death. The winds of this part of the world tore people to shreds with mere passing, only for demonic gusts to put them back together and do it all over again. The Gerudo women had been turned into skeletons, still wearing the same clothing and still holding the same spears. The walls of their, as in over there, homes were now entirely made of people who were all crushed beneath one another. Here, they used these people for ceaseless murder, nothing more, nothing less. Throats slit, bodies decapitated, impalement. Any form of death was welcome here. It literally began to rain blood. I watched in awe as several skeleton women reached into one man's stomach and ripped him apart, piece by piece, bone by bone, organ by organ. Then they began to skin him with their claws, even though he's probably dead at that point. Skeletons have claws, I learned today. I looked to the cliffs and saw miserable souls hanging, nailed to the rocks in the same fashion as one who would be crucified. I could barely hear their dying groans. Their leader, Naburu, reminded me solely of Elizabeth. I don't fucking know who that is. Her skin remained intact and she wore a white, bloody gown. She stood in the center of it all, murdering and bringing back person after person, mindlessly laughing and bathing in the blood that dropped from the sky. She looked up, held her mouth open, and swallowed every drop that fell in. She swung around and with her dagger, I'm surprised it doesn't say dagger or sharp object for the third time, slit the throat of one innocent man who dropped to the ground. She followed him and, like a vampire, bit on his neck, sucking him dry. They all ignored me as I was apparent. They all ignored me as I was apparent, certainly. I always had a thing for vampires. The voice laughed. Naburu looked up at me suddenly, exposing fangs through her gaping mouth. I backed away slowly. She took her dagger in hand and began to walk towards me. I ran back down the stairs. She jumped onto the giant rock beside me and then dropped, stopping me before I could go any further. I began to shake. My eyes felt as though they were about to pop from their sockets. She said she had not dined on fresh blood in some time and would kill me there if her master didn't have use for me. She left me be after a wink and a smirk before returning to the constant slaughter. I left before going in the direction of the spirit temple, escaping this part of Hylian hell. I was at the area where both Hyrule and Ganon's castles were meant to be. But this castle is far worse. It was a black kingdom that resembled Dracula's castle in Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness. What did I say? I called it from the very beginning. I mean, I kind of knew that, but still, I wasn't sure if this was the same story at that point. The center of all the evil in this world, all the chaos and hell was definitely there. I walked in cautiously and in fear. I somehow managed to be taken all the way up to a room that resembled both Ganon's boss room and the castle keep in Castlevania. The room was large, with stained glass windows and pillars on both sides. The stained glass depicted Bowser tearing off Mario's head and burning Peach alive. Bowser died. No continuity in this story, dude. Ganon driving the Master Sword through Link's chest, and Dracula from Castlevania finally overcoming the Belmonts and taking his rightful throne. These three games on the N64 were all my favorites. A lush red carpet went from my feet all the way to the coffin at the end, very similar to the Castle Keep in Ganon's Tower, certainly. I knew what I was meant to do while being here, and all that I could do was obey. Above the coffin was a crucified Zelda, the princess of Hyrule, her divine robes torn and tattered with blood, staining her what was surely immaculate features. What the fuck? She had a sword sticking from her chest, and her head was held back with a rope around her neck, even though she was crucified. So how should she get hung? Her eyes and mouth were sewn completely shut. The terror that was on her face spoke to me, even though her eyes and mouth were shut. So I don't know how you got any kind of emotion from her. Told me a story of what pain truly was. I think that her teeth were missing too, even though her mouth was sewn shut. So how the fuck could you possibly tell that? But there's no way I could be sure. I walked across the room, listening to the voices and whispers coming from all ends. As I reached the coffin, I examined it further. It was white, but had a black outline to it. As I put my hands on the coffin's lid, I felt a strange surge going through me, a dark power that seized all my motions, all my will for a brief moment. I'm so fucking bored of this. I closed my eyes tight, sweat dropped from my nose, my heartbeat was like a drum out of rhythm. Almost done. I know the feeling, dude. I pushed forward with all my might, all the power I had left, relatable, until the lid dropped into the floor behind it. I found my willpower to open my eyes. What did I see? It wasn't a monster, a demon, or black mass. It was a man, appearing to be nothing more. His hair was long and black, and he wore a shaded cloak. I found myself being drawn to him. I began to tremble. I felt the evil power in this room grow even stronger. The man's head turned, his black eyes opened, the same black eyes that my girlfriend had when I awakened from my sleep, and he looked into mine. "Welcome to my kingdom." I drew back and desperately ran to the doors to escape. A black mist swirled through the room. It was him! The one within the coffin was the Black Mass himself. He began to circle around me. The entire room became black as he moved around me with infinite speed. I thought for sure that death was at hand. Within the darkness, he appeared before me with a toothy grin, tracing the outlines of his features. The grin traced the outlines of his features? He was young, that much was certain, and bore a staff that it greatly resembled Ganon's trident of power that he doesn't have in Ocarina of Time and only has in 2D games. And it's just a trident. It doesn't really resemble anything. It's just a trident, dude. On his forehead and both hands, I can make out the outlines of the legendary Triforce spoke of in the Zelda storyline. On his shoulders were spikes that resembled the ones that Bowser had on his shell, but the tips were jagged. Last but not least, he had fangs like a vampire, and his cloak reminded me specifically of Dracula from Castlevania 64, even though just a minute ago you said he looked like a normal man with black eyes. He appeared to me as all three villains combined into one entity, even though Bowser was dead. And Ganondorf was in this story previously, and Castlevania just kind of got shoehorned in here at the very end. I knew that I could not run and that I could not hide. He had me right where he wanted me all along. Nibiru and my uncle had said that he had a plan for me. Perhaps this was it, to toy with me and then bring me here to his resting place. I looked down, eyes clamped shut, and thought about my options, so I did not have many. If I was going to die, I wanted to go down fighting. I looked back at him. I looked back up at him. Tearing eyes and broken spirit. I asked him who he was. There was a pause for a moment, and his grin grew even bigger. All these games, all that he had shown me, the world that he was in control of, this man was evil incarnate, darkness given flesh. I feared his answer, the sound of his voice, I just wanted it all to end. I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't. Finally, after what felt like minutes of silence, he answered me. The look on his face showed an arrogance about him. The tone of his voice told me that he felt himself above me, and the glare of his eyes told me that I was his. I'm the devil. With a laugh, he waved his trident and pointed at me. I felt an intense pain in my chest. I dropped to both knees and shrieked in the intense pain. A powerful pressure welled up inside me and pushed out through every opening it could find. Blood came from my mouth, ears and eye sockets. I felt the life slipping through my body at an exceedingly fast rate. I looked up at him, my eyes failing me, but anger showing itself nonetheless. I couldn't breathe. My heart ceased beating. I started to feel as if time itself froze. The cold. I felt death's embrace overtake me. The last thing I heard was the voice of my beloved before I died. Okay, well, that's the end. There's a contributor on this page called, I can't pronounce that. I have no fucking clue. Impy Real Invective. And Steam Phoenix for this particular story. So that makes me think that this story probably isn't written by the same person if the first person was written by someone called the Devil God. Yeah. Anyway, that was Mario 64 Damned and Ocarina of Time Damned. A wacky story, dude. He died and then wrote a story about it. Anyway, I'm fucking exhausted. It's 4:30 a.m., 4:40 a.m., and I'm drunk as fuck, and that's both done. Drink both of them. Fucking gross, dude. Okay. Bye.